Shadows of the mind. I often wonder when the darkness began to creep into my life. Was it a slow descent or a swift plunge? Perhaps it was a mixture of both, the edges of my sanity fraying gradually until one day, it all unraveled. I found myself standing at the threshold of an existence marred by fear and confusion, a twisted labyrinth of my own creation where the line between reality and delusion blurred. It all began on an ordinary evening when I stumbled upon an old, dusty journal at a flea market. The journal was unremarkable, bound in faded leather, but as soon as I held it, an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. I thumbed through the pages, filled with frantic handwriting and cryptic symbols that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. The entries spoke of unspeakable horrors, of a descent into madness that gripped its author until they were consumed by the very darkness they sought to unveil. Intrigued, I felt compelled to purchase the journal. Little did I know that bringing it home would invite a relentless darkness into my life, one that would unveil the depths of my own psyche. I devoted myself to deciphering the entries, which became increasingly nonsensical and panic-stricken. The more I read, the more I felt the author's anguish washing over me like a tide of despair. As I immersed myself deeper into the text, I began to experience strange occurrences, objects moving when I wasn't looking, whispers that danced just beyond the edge of my hearing, shadows flitting across the corners of my vision. The atmosphere of my once comfortable home transformed into something oppressive, a living entity that breathed alongside me. It felt as if the journal had awakened something hidden within me, feeding on my fears and insecurities. It didn't dawn on me until late one night, consumed by the need to understand, that I had crossed a threshold. Sitting in the dim light of my study, I stumbled upon an entry describing a ritual, a means to summon the shadow that dwelled within. The author warned of its seductive allure and the price it exacted from the unprepared. My heart raced as I read the words, feeling a pulsing draw in my chest, a whisper urging me to proceed. Rational thought faded, eclipsed by curiosity and desperation for understanding. Against my better judgment, I gathered the items required as described, a mirror, candles, and the journal itself. I arranged everything anxiously, the air thick with anticipation and dread. As I lit the candles, their flames flickered like the pulse of fear in my chest. I muttered the words from the page, each syllable feeling like a key unlocking a door to my own soul. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, the shadows in the room seemed to shift, elongating and twisting. As I peered into the mirror, my heart leaped into my throat. What stared back at me was not my reflection but a twisted visage, warped features and sunken eyes. A monstrous version of myself emerged, encapsulating my darkest fears and insecurities. I felt a surge of terror, but it was too late to retreat. With ghastly clarity, the entity spoke, its voice a cacophony of whispers that echoed deep within my mind. You seek knowledge, but knowledge comes with a price. I felt the chilling plunge into despair as my past failures and regrets surfaced, each one more suffocating than the last. I was drowning in the very essence of my fears, each moment dragging me lower into the abyss. The hours slipped away as I wrestled with the shadow, struggling to maintain my grip on reality. It was a harrowing confrontation, the battle between the light of my reason and the darkness that writhed within. Each time I thought I had the upper hand, the shadow revealed another layer of torment, mocking my struggle, exposing my vulnerabilities. The further I descended into this chaos, the more I lost sight of myself. My days became an agonizing blur, as I wandered through life like a ghost, trapped in the throes of madness. Friends and family grew concerned, but I pushed them away, too consumed by my obsession to acknowledge the scars growing within. I became a recluse, a prisoner of my own mind. There were moments of clarity, brief awakenings where I caught glimpses of who I used to be, but they were overshadowed by tantalizing whispers luring me back. Stay with us, they beckoned. We will show you the truth. It was intoxicating, this promise of understanding, and despite my fear, I found myself teetering on the edge, willing to forego my sanity for the sake of enlightenment. Months passed, and I became a shadow of my former self, slipping between reality and hallucination. Each night, the entity grew stronger, feeding off my despair, until I was a mere puppet in its haunting play. I felt as though it had claimed my very essence, stripping me of my identity, leaving only an empty shell. In one final desperate attempt to reclaim my life, I decided to confront the creature lurking behind the mirror. Armed with a journal, I forced myself to repeat the words once more, resolute in my desire to sever the connection. "You do not own me," I shouted, the words echoing through the room as I shattered the mirror with a nearby candle holder. Shards flew in all directions, glinting with a sinister light. What happened next felt like an eternity in darkness. The room erupted in chaos as the entity screamed, a cacophony of my own fears reflected back at me. I was engulfed in a tempest of emotions, fear, regret, and sorrow, each one crashing over me like waves threatening to drown me once more. It was in this chaos that something shifted inside me. As I stood in the remnants of glass, I caught a fleeting glimpse of myself, broken, yes, but alive. It dawned on me that the darkness had no power over me unless I permitted it. I understood that the real horror lay not in the shadows themselves, but in my willingness to surrender to them. That was the lesson I had learned through unfathomable torment. Knowledge without wisdom could lead to disastrous consequences. With renewed resolve, I faced the whispering shadows and proclaimed, "You are not my truth, merely fragments of fear." The shadows shrank back, the voice diminishing until it faded into silence. I felt the grip of madness loosen, the darkness receding, leaving me breathless and weary but alive. Though the journey had left its scars, both physically and psychologically, I emerged from that ordeal transformed. I vowed to tread carefully, acknowledging the darkness within while holding onto the light of reason. I learned the importance of balance, of understanding that curiosity must coexist with caution, for the corridors of the mind can lead to terrifying places. In the aftermath, I burned the journal, watching the flames consume its dark writings, purging the last remnants of the shadow that had haunted me. I stepped into the world again, aware of the fragility of sanity but resolute in my understanding. The shadows may always linger at the edges of my consciousness, but I had faced them and survived. That was my new truth, a reminder of the boundaries between knowledge and madness, one that I would carry with me forever.